Welcome, everyone, to the second stakeholder meeting of the Georgia EPD HAPs emissions inventory. My name is Emily Phillips. I am the HAPs inventory lead at the Emissions and Control Strategies Unit. Joined with me is Ruben, who will be monitoring the chat during the discussion portion. So we'll start out this meeting with a review of the Georgia HAPs inventory, and then we'll go over specific elements we're considering. Then I'll talk about the HAPs pilot program for the 2022 emissions inventory year. Then we'll go over the proposed timeline for implementation, and then touch on the federal HAPs inventory rule status, and then move on to our discussion questions. So increased attention to the associated HAPs emissions on a national level. So with EPA's publication of things like the air tox screen, EPA inventory is currently takes data from the toxics release inventory and the HAP augmentation process of the criteria air pollutant national emissions inventory. But these methods do not lead to a reliably accurate inventory for modeling use. So Georgia wants to develop a Georgia-specific HAPs emissions data, and EPA has also talked about making HAPs reporting a federal requirement, so this would be getting ahead of that as well. So currently for EPA modeling data, as I said before, EPA uses TRI and HAP augmentation processes. If we had our own inventory, that data would come primarily from the Georgia HAPs inventory. The current procedure when EPA requests verification of data is EPD then has to go and contact facilities randomly throughout the year. But if we had our own inventory, that data would already be verified by EPD during the emissions inventory and submittal process. So currently, when we have any issues with that data, EPD then has to suggest corrections to EPA. But if we had our own inventory, we would have already reviewed and approved that data before it is included in an EPA database. So now let's talk about specific elements being considered in this inventory for this inventory. So we have decided instead of doing a total HAPs actual HAPs threshold to move to a de minimis value threshold still for actual HAPs of the year, not a potential to emit. So de minimis values are the level at which emissions are considered low enough to be insignificant. So for the HAPs inventory, de minimis would be based on the facility-wide total for each HAP, so not based on individual units. We are currently plan to base this de minimis value on the minimum emissions rate MERS listed in Appendix A of the Georgia Air Toxics Guidelines found at this link. And the MERS are in pounds per year, and they're the emissions rate that requires toxics air modeling to be performed for air permitting in Georgia. So we've divided the MER values into 5 different pollutant classes. So you have less than 1 requires all emissions reported, and then 1 through 10 requires any more than 1 pound per year of emissions reported, and so forth, doing that lower bound for each class of pollutant. So Class A pollutants must be reported regardless of the amount emitted. So this is kind of replacing that pollutants of interest class that we talked about before. And this is the initial list of Class A pollutants that we developed based on the MER. So who would report to the HAPs inventory? Only permitted facilities would be required to report at this time. We would be using the Combined Air Emissions Reporting System, known as CARES, for submittal. This is what we use for our criteria air pollutants. So if a facility emitted any pollutant over the reporting threshold, they would then be required to submit if they already submitted their CAPs annually, or submitted or emit a Class A pollutant, they would be required to report annually. But if they do not emit any Class A pollutants and are not already submitting to the inventory, they only need to report triennially. So exemptions being considered: facilities with boilers with a capacity under 250 million BTU of natural gas, hospital activities excluding ethylene oxide emissions. So ethylene oxide emissions would have to be reported. They're Class A pollutant, but any other hospital activities. Emergency RICE, this is including compression and spark ignition engines. And then any emissions from an insignificant activity. These are activities already listed and defined by Georgia EPD and can be found on our website. So we're also considering what sorts of guidance and assistance we can provide for reporting MCARES. We are developing a guidance document to be released once we have our rule published to provide instruction and resources. This would include industry-specific emissions factors and examples, how to report in CARES, an explanation of threshold and de minimis values, and a clear list of any exemptions that we have. And then we also want to provide resources for people who are already in CARES, and then for facilities that are not in CARES. So for facilities in CARES, we are currently considering an optional use of HAP augmentation to estimate initial HAPs at a facility. And then the facility would be able to go in and edit and make those numbers more specific for their facility. And then any facilities that are new to CARES would provide we would have some generic calculation bulk upload sheets based on their NICS code. So this year we had a pilot program for the 2022 emissions inventory year. This consisted of 5 monthly meetings. About at least 50 people attended each meeting, and these were over specific discussion topics. And they provided some valuable and specific feedback in between the first stakeholder meeting and now. And then another part of that pilot program was 15 facilities that reported HAPs to CARES, representing the following industries: so pulp and paper, painting and coating, automotive manufacturing, beverage manufacturing, and national security. And we got some more specific feedback from them on how long it takes to initially set up HAPs in CARES, and then for facilities that have reported for multiple years, how long it takes to submit HAPs following years once everything's set up in CARES. So our timeline for implementation is as follows. So the initial stakeholder meeting was held back in February, with the comment section ending in March 15th. And then today is our second stakeholder meeting. The comments period for this will end August 7th. We don't currently have a deadline proposed for our rule edition, but we will be proposing a rule edition in section 391-3-1-.026, establishing specifically talking about a HAPs inventory. And then submittal of the first HAP data for facilities that already report CAPs annually would be June 30th of 2025. And then we would have our first triennial reporting year, June 30th, 2027. So as I had mentioned previously, EPA is currently working to require air emission, that the AERR rule include HAP emissions. They expect a proposed rule to be released August of this year. I believe there's also a state meeting that is happening today at this time as well, going over some more specifics of that. But this is all we have right now, is that they're moving forward considering adding HAPs to the AER rule. All right, now let's move on to the discussion portion. So at this time, if you'd like to make a comment, please virtually raise your hand by using the reactions menu at the bottom of the Zoom screen and select raise hands. If you have joined this meeting by phone, we ask that you press *9 to indicate that you would like to make a comment. So any questions or concerns about the methodology for determining the de minimis values for insignificant emissions levels and the threshold levels? All right, any thoughts on the new thresholds, de minimis values? Okay. Next question is, are there any thoughts about the list of Class A pollutants? So this is kind of replacing the pollutants of interest. Okay. All right. Are there any thoughts or concerns about the approach for determining who needs to report or how often?
Hey, Emily, we do have Bill Holden here he's raising his hand, so I'll just ask you to unmute, and then you can unmute on your end, Bill, and you can leave your comment or question.
All right, thank you. No, I just had one quick question. If you could scroll back to, I think it was slide 15. I didn't get a chance to get all of the, I didn't get a chance to quite digest all of that information about the rule. So I was kind of curious about that. So yeah.
And this will be posted on our HAPs EPD page after.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I didn't have any specific questions on this. I just wanted to get another look at it. So I appreciate it.
So any questions or thoughts on the frequency or determination of reporting? Okay. Any concerns about the exemptions currently listed? Are there any activities that you think should be considered that we haven't considered? Do you have any other ideas for useful training and guidance materials? Do you want a tutorial on how to submit HAPs? Any examples of activities that are exempt, that sort of thing?
Emily, we do have a comment in the chat from Paige Murphy. Her comment being a tutorial a tutorial on how to submit HAPs would be great. Thank you for that comment, Paige.
Mhm. All right. So, any facilities would you be willing to use any like spreadsheet calculators we would provide, or would you just rather you develop your own calculations? Is that something that would a calculation spreadsheet be useful to you?
So we do have a comment from Giles Ragsdale in sort of piggybacking off that. He's saying his facility already uses detailed spreadsheet calculations.
And I see someone asked, are facilities with synthetic minor permits required to report? Yes. This would include any permitted facilities, not just Title V. Anyone else have any thoughts on training materials or calculation tools?
We do have a question from John Biggs. He's asking, when are the details coming, login, etc. So Emily, if you have any.
I'm not sure. Do you mean how to log into CARES? What do you mean exactly with details? Okay, yeah, we would provide specifics on how to get set up in CARES as soon as this becomes a requirement. That would be part of the guidance documents we'd release. And we are on track. We'll hopefully have something in the new year, but that's pretty tentative. Don't want to add a hard deadline when we don't have one yet.
We have Deborah Phillips, who has raised her hand. I will ask you to unmute and you can ask a question or submit a comment.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, EPD, for providing these stakeholder opportunities. Emily, does EPD know about how many facilities will have this new requirement of developing a HAPs emissions inventory? And given the schedule that y'all laid out between EPA's rulemaking and EPD's possibly the 2025 timeline of submitting, I guess, this information into CARES, what's EPD's thoughts on the schedule requiring this number of facilities to submit, well, prepare for, do the emission inventory and then submit the data to EPD? I'm just wondering what EPD's thoughts are. Do you feel like you have enough folks to do this? Can you give this group a sense of how many facilities might be affected and how big the workload might be?
Yeah, so we're I believe it's hard to say exactly how many because we don't know the specifics of which facilities would fall into the reporting threshold requirement. I believe it's around 500 total facilities that would be reporting triennially. We've gotten our criteria air pollutant inventory pretty well handled at this point. So we'll use the same team to start QAing the HAPs inventory. We might end up having to hire someone else, but we're pretty confident that we can get it going, especially the annual, starting with an annual year to get a process down that's smooth, and so hopefully our triennial year will be go smoother with some more experience. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute as quickly. Yes, and I guess I was looking for, maybe EPD doesn't have this information yet, a better sense of what that schedule would be, given that there might be as many as 500 facilities. When would EPD maybe start requiring this? Is it going to be by sector? Is it going to be by when a Title V renewal is due? Any thoughts on that?
I believe it's just, it will, all facilities that it would apply to, starting on that 2025 reporting year. Or 2024 reporting year, reporting in 2025. So that deadline, the timeline had it as June 30th. That's our deadline for criteria air pollutants as well. So that's when facilities that are already reporting would be required to submit starting in 2025. And then the next triennial year would be 2027.
Okay, have you, and thanks, if I could just follow up maybe with just one more question. Have you received any feedback or concern from folks who might have a large number of emissions with meeting deadlines, securing help, I guess someone to do the emissions inventory, the budgeting requirements and that kind of stuff? Have you given any thoughts where there might be, some folks might be given more time, or maybe that isn't even a concern?
We haven't received any specific worry about deadlines yet that I recall, but we can take into consideration any sort of deadlines for larger, complicated facilities.
Thanks, Emily. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Emily, we have a couple questions in the chat. We have one from Alex. How different is this reporting from the semi-annual air emissions reporting?
I'm not sure what you mean by semi-annual air emissions. Are you referring to permitting requirements? Alex, can you clarify? Yes, so this would be separate from that. But probably would use the same, you could use the same calculation methods.
We have another question from Bill Hoden. Current annual inventory reporters HAP inventory due in 2025 or 2024, and current triennial reporters due in 2027 for 2026? Question mark.
Yes. And then we, in addition, in 2027 for the 2026 year, we would begin to include any synthetic minor and minor permitted facilities. So we've already kind of gotten to this, but are there any more general questions, comments, concerns?
We have one more question from Alex. What do you mean by triennial reporting? Is this for Title V sources?
No, so we're basically using the triennial annual schedule that criteria air pollutants are using, and kind of piggybacking off of that for the HAPs reporting schedule. So pretty much only Title V facilities would be required to report annually, because those are the ones that are already reporting their criteria air pollutants in CARES. And then every 3 years, based on that already established triennial reporting schedule for criteria air pollutants, that's when we would require everyone else to report. So that's every 3 years, 2023, 2026, so on. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Any more general questions or comments? Okay. So if you think of anything after the fact, our comment period ends August 7th. You can send any comments to emily.phillips@dnr.ga.gov. And this recording will be posted on our HAPs inventory page at EPD, on the EPD website, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint. So thanks, everyone. This has been really helpful. Thanks you all for coming. We appreciate your participation in this. So have a good rest of your day.